I'm Brad Stone in San Francisco, in for Emily Chang. This is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up in the next hour, Apple shares fall as President Trump ponders further tariffs on Chinese-made goods, including the iPhone. Will a charm offensive by Tim Cook help dissuade the administration? Plus, where's Mark Zuckerberg? UK lawmakers are angry the Facebook CEO didn't turn up to answer questions, tweeting out a photograph of his empty chair. And the Chinese-backed Silicon Valley-designed car its makers hope will speed past Tesla in China. We talked to the CEO of Byton about the race for the Chinese EV market. But first to our top story. Apple shares were hit hard after President Trump hinted he might include iPhones in the next round of tariffs on Chinese imports. Now, 24 hours later, CEO Tim Cook is spending the day with Ivanka Trump, touring schools in Idaho. The trip provides Cook an opportunity for an extended conversation with the president's daughter and senior advisor just before Trump holds a key meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping in Buenos Aires later this week. Trade tensions will be a major part of the agenda. Here to discuss, Tom Forte, analyst at D.A. Davidson. He has a buy rating on Apple with a price target of $290. And also with us from Los Angeles is Mark Gurman, who covers Apple for Bloomberg Technology. Tom, let's start with you. In a recent note, you said you were watching China very carefully, saying it's the biggest single threat to shares of Apple. So how seriously are you taking this threat from President Trump?
Yep, I think today you have to assume that everything out of China will be tariffed. And I think that on that assumption, then you have to think about who has pricing power. And if you look at Apple and you take, for example, the least expensive new iPhone, the XR, is 7.5% more expensive than last year's least expensive new iPhone, the 8. So I do think Apple has pricing power and versus their peers can better withstand tariffs, assuming the next round is everything coming out of China.
Well, I mean, Tom, let's put the potential impact aside. I mean, do you think this is real? Does the president mean it?
Absolutely. So if you think about to date, you've had multiple rounds of tariffs. You have one tariff in place today that escalates from a 10% tariff to a 25% tariff on January 1st. So I think at this point in time, you have to make the assumption that tariffs are real and that there's more to come. And as far as what more could be tariffed, I think you have to assume that everything coming out of China may be subject to a tariff.
So Mark Gurman, Tim Cook is spending some quality time with Ivanka Trump today. Will that make an impact? And how has the administration's relationship been with Apple? Does Tim have the currency with the administration to make an impact here?
That's a great question, Brad, and I think they do. If you saw what happened in early September, Apple put out a statement saying that two of their most valuable products, the AirPods and the Apple Watch, would be impacted by the tariffs. This was on the first $200 billion worth of goods. A couple days later, not too long after that, the Trump administration came out and said, okay, we're not going to allow tariffs on the Apple Watch or the AirPods anymore. Now Trump has this day to spend with the president's daughter and obviously a close advisor. Surely to discuss this is going to be one of the topics on the agenda besides the schools they're visiting. And so I think they have that sway power with the Trump administration as they've shown in the past. And they'll probably discuss how this would be bad for Apple, which, you know, at the end of the day, despite exporting a lot of goods from China, is a U.S.-based company.
So, Tom, let's say that Tim is not successful today making his case to the president's daughter, and we do see a 10% tariff on iPads and iPhones that have not been previously affected by this trade war. So you talked a little bit about how Apple could potentially mitigate the impact with the XR. What about the XS, those premium-priced phones that, you know, some suppliers and analyst reports say maybe it's not doing as well as Apple had hoped?
Sure. So generally speaking, I think investors are underestimating the ability of companies like Apple to mitigate the risk of tariffs. And for example, what you're seeing is the Chinese government is actively devaluing its currency. So that'll take some of the sting out of tariffs. We're also hearing that in some instances, the Chinese government is subsidizing manufacturers who might be affected by it. Additionally, a lot of Apple suppliers are already moving their supply chain out of China. And really, on a short-term basis, the big winner from the prolonged China-U.S. trade war is Vietnam, as you're seeing a lot of manufacturers starting to make products in Vietnam rather than China. So I do think that Apple and other companies that are heavily reliant on China for their supply chain have a lot of opportunities to mitigate risk from tariffs. As it pertains specifically to the XS, I think the good news for Apple the last two product cycles has been with the higher average selling prices, they don't have to sell as many units to bear the fruits from a financial standpoint.
Mark Gurman, do you agree with that? I mean, this has not been a great season from what we know so far for Apple. Shares are down. You have suppliers like Foxconn saying they're ramping back production. Surely a 10% tariff, perhaps Apple can mitigate it somewhat. Can't be good news for Apple in the holiday season of 2018.
Yeah, absolutely not. I don't think this is good news for pretty much anyone, the consumer, Apple, or the suppliers. The suppliers, they're already losing money on Apple because Apple squeezes them so much. Apple plays multiple suppliers against each other in order to get the best prices. So from that standpoint, given Apple's power, they will be able to mitigate the 10% tariffs if those do indeed come into effect somewhat. But I don't think it matters. I think aside from that, the iPhone is clearly not selling as well as expected. We saw 4 Apple suppliers that make significant components for the company lower their revenue estimates for the current quarter, all during the same week, all citing a major consumer electronics company. So that is pretty alarming. So it's just bad news after bad news, stories for Apple here, and I don't see it getting much better in the short term.
Tom, is the market misinterpreting the news from these suppliers like Foxconn?
Well, all right, so two things. One, going into when Apple reported the September quarter, they indicated they're experiencing weakness in emerging markets, but importantly not China, in Brazil, Russia, India, and Turkey. So I think they were trying to adjust expectations to begin with when they reported the September quarter. But I think the other thing we're overlooking is one of the reasons for the tariffs is to not only improve our trade imbalance with China, but also to protect the intellectual property of U.S. manufacturers such as Apple. So while Tim Cook's done an amazing job of balancing a tightrope between managing the China suppliers, selling a large portion of their products to Chinese consumers, and then also managing sales and things like that, Apple actually stands to benefit from some of the things I think the tariffs are aimed to protect, which is the intellectual property rights of U.S. companies, including Apple.
So, Mark, what kind of argument do you think Apple CEO Tim Cook is making today with the president's daughter?
I think it comes down to this is going to hurt the consumer more than anything. That has been their argument from the Apple Watch standpoint and the AirPods standpoint, and that worked, clearly. That was their argument, and then the Trump administration reversed course. So why not try the same trick again? If Apple has to increase the price of iPhones, people are going to buy less of them, and they might want to look to phones manufactured by the Chinese in the first place, like Xiaomi and Huawei. I think that's a fairly good argument. If our phones are too expensive, where do you think the consumers are going to go? Which would defeat the entire purpose of, or one of the purposes of the tariffs in the first place.
Okay, we have to leave it there. Tom Forte of D.A. Davidson and Bloomberg Technology's Mark Gurman, thank you both for joining. Elon Musk says you can change the world, but not if you only work a 40-hour week. The man behind Tesla, SpaceX, and a couple of other companies wrote in a tweet that you need to work between 80 to 100 hours a week to make an impact. Last month, Musk told Recode he was working up to 120 hours a week at times during the year as Tesla ramped up Model 3 production. Coming up, UK lawmakers are not happy with Mark Zuckerberg as the Facebook CEO pulls a no-show at Tuesday's hearing. Why the government is cracking down on the social network, next. And if you like Bloomberg News, check us out on the radio. You can listen on the Bloomberg app, Bloomberg.com, and in the U.S. on Sirius XM. This is Bloomberg. Where's Mark Zuckerberg? That's the question asked Tuesday by the International Grand Committee on Disinformation and Fake News, essentially a select committee of the UK Parliament that invited lawmakers from 9 other countries to participate. The Department of Digital, Culture, Media and Sport tweeted this image of an empty chair after Facebook's founder failed to show up for the hearing. In Washington to discuss, CEO of Digital Content Next, a trade association that represents premium online publishers. Also with us, Bloomberg Technology's Jeremy Kahn, who joins us from London. Jeremy, let's start with you. You monitored the hearing today. Set the scene. This was an extraordinary hearing, 9 countries. What was it like, and how did it go for Facebook?
Yeah, well, as you said, the UK Parliament invited lawmakers from a host of other countries, Singapore, Argentina, Brazil, as well as some smaller European countries, all to this hearing, I think with the idea that maybe they could draw Mark Zuckerberg out. The committee here in the UK has asked Zuckerberg to come several times. He's always refused. Well, he didn't show up again, which made a lot of lawmakers quite angry. Instead, Facebook sent Richard Allen, who is sort of their chief lobbyist in Europe. He's head of policy for them in this region, and he tried to answer their questions. But a lot of lawmakers were not very happy, and at times the exchanges got quite heated.
Jason, I saw you started a tweet this morning with the word "whoa." I think you were referring to revelations in the hearing that maybe Facebook knew about Russian interference back in 2014. Why does the committee think that, and why is it important?
Well, that surfaced as a result of some documents that were famously seized over the weekend, and we'll find more about those documents in the next few weeks. I also made that comment about the timeline in which Facebook possibly found out about Cambridge Analytica. We had the data commissioner for the UK testify that very senior managers at Facebook, and they apparently have the list of who those employees were aware of Cambridge Analytica. And she said in 2014 or 2015, and this is the first time we've heard evidence that Facebook possibly knew about Cambridge Analytica before we read about it in 2015 in the press, and that's important.
Yeah, and clearly we'll be hearing a little bit more about those documents seized as part of a California case filed by an app maker against Facebook. Now the UK Parliament has those documents. Jason, what do you suspect is in those, and why have they become so central to the UK government's inquiry into Facebook?
Well, this parliamentary committee is owed a lot of credit by I think everyone around the globe. They've been tenacious for the past year, asking very specific questions, very smart questions. I think everybody should be thrilled at how these lawmakers are trying to hold Facebook accountable despite Facebook's obfuscations. And that set of documents may be further evidence to what was actually happening at Facebook back in these critical years of probably 2012 to 2014. There were a lot of questions around Facebook's decision making and who had access to data, which apps were restricted at a period in time from getting access to that data. And Cambridge Analytica obviously is a part of that discussion. And so people want to know what's in those documents, and I think it's quite good that they're pushing so hard.
Jeremy Kahn, in your story today on Bloomberg.com, you did get a comment from Facebook about this potential revelation in these documents that maybe the company knew about Russian interference as early as 2014. What did Facebook say about that revelation and about the documents?
Yeah, so Facebook, this was about a document that was referenced but not released by the committee, but Damian Collins, who's head of the committee, referenced it, said there was a document, an internal email from engineer citing Russia using these features that allowed third-party app developers to harvest a lot of data from Facebook, doing this back in October 2014. Facebook came back and told us that this was taken out of context, and also that this claim had been investigated at the time and found to be groundless. And that's what they told us. Now, Richard Allen, who was actually testifying, he refused to discuss the documents in front of the committee because they are under seal in California, other than to say that they are only represent a partial view and that they were selected by a hostile litigant to make Facebook look bad. But I think we are going to be finding out quite a lot more. The committee has promised to release those documents at some point over the next week.
Jason, should Mark Zuckerberg have been there today?
Absolutely. They've been asking questions, very specific questions that the answer has always been the buck stops with Mark Zuckerberg, and that the people that testified previously didn't have the answers to their questions. And so they've gone to the top with that in mind, and Mark is an empty chair. And I think that looks very poorly on Facebook. And they've refused to answer this question regarding when Mark Zuckerberg personally knew about Cambridge Analytica. And Richard Allen's testimony this morning seemed to indicate it was March of 2018, which is just incredibly hard to believe. And so it's quite I think quite a sign of poor faith in Facebook to 9 different countries not to show up for this hearing with their CEO, and that's very concerning.
Jason, following this today, have the prospects changed for regulatory action, for antitrust actions like splitting up the company?
I think the FTC is by far the most important regulatory group now at this point. They are investigating Facebook. They've told us that. And we don't know when Facebook knew about these issues and the timeline. And there's a lot of questions here that they should be asking. And there's a significant fine behind that. And also they could possibly push to break up the company. We think that's probably very unlikely. But the questions being asked, I think it's worth pointing out also that there was a surprise appearance at the end of the hearing today by a former CTO of the FTC, Ashkan Soltani.
Right, Ashkan Soltani, right.
Happened to be in London, and they asked him to come over about something he had tweeted, and he specifically got in front of the parliamentary committee on short notice and said that what Richard Allen had told them just hours earlier was either misleading, false, or a lie. And so I think there's a lot of questions that our FTC should be asking right now.
So Jeremy, how does Facebook feel at the end of this committee hearing?
Well, I'm sure they don't feel great. They took quite a battering. On the other hand, in a way, by denying the committee Zuckerberg, by not having him be there, in a way, maybe they kept this contained. If Zuckerberg had testified, you would have had literally every television network, I think, on the planet probably broadcasting the hearing live. You had that kind of attention around his Senate testimony and House testimony earlier in the year, and I think they were trying to avoid that. And by sending Richard Allen, who's this rather innocuous and anonymous figure, to testify, although they angered the lawmakers by not having Zuckerberg there, they probably denied this some of the oxygen it might have otherwise gotten if he had appeared.
Coming up, Amazon just saw its biggest shopping day in history on Cyber Monday, topping its very own Prime Day. Which categories perform best and the site's top sellers? Next. And Bloomberg Technology is live streaming on Twitter. Check us out at Technology and be sure to follow our global breaking news network, TikTok, on Twitter. This is Bloomberg. Cyber Monday sales hit an all-time high this year, and Amazon was no exception to the record-breaking. On Tuesday, the retail giant said it had its biggest shopping day in history on Cyber Monday, with the most products ordered worldwide than any other day. The holiday weekend set a record for Amazon as customers purchased millions of more products this Thanksgiving through Cyber Monday compared to the same period last year. Customers worldwide bought more than 18 million toys and 13 million fashion items on Black Friday and Cyber Monday combined. Joining us from New York, Bloomberg Opinion's Shira Ovide. Shira, welcome. We should tell our viewers to buckle in because I gather from reading your Twitter feed this morning that you were not impressed by Amazon's press release. Is that true?
That's fair. Yeah, I think you can comfortably ignore everything that Amazon says about holiday shopping trends this year and every year. So the word record, Amazon used it 7 times in its news release this morning about holiday sales over the Thanksgiving weekend. But of course, as is Amazon's habit, there was no specificity around the numbers. Is 18 million toys a lot or a little? It is a record Cyber Monday for every retailer in the United States across the industry, according to Adobe.
That's right. Internet penetration is growing. E-commerce is growing.
Right.
It's natural to be a record. But, there was some stuff in here, right? 20% more sales from small and medium-sized business. Does, Shira, this not count for anything?
Yeah, I mean, it's directionally useful. It's interesting to see what people are buying. Often that reflects what Amazon is heavily promoting or discounting. So, yeah, it's useful to know that they sold a lot of Echoes and Instant Pots, but it's not as revelatory as Amazon suggests, no.
I'm always, interested in how Amazon uses these moments to basically promote the things it cares about. So we've got the 4-star stores here. It's a new physical star format. We got the Ring devices for your home. We got all the Echo devices. These are the things that Amazon wants to highlight, wants people to pay attention to for the holiday season, right?
That's right. And I was struck looking on Amazon over the Thanksgiving holiday, how much Amazon was promoting its own products. So you saw a lot of deep discounts on Echo devices and the Ring, which is the home security company that Amazon now owns. And as you said, there was some promotions for things like Prime Video releases and Amazon's digital music service and the 4-star stores and bookstores. So it is interesting to see how much Amazon uses the holidays to promote itself. Perhaps no big surprise there.
So I'm going to serve you up a softball here. Amazon appears to have coined a phrase in this press release, the Turkey 5. I had not heard of this before. What is it? And Shira, what do you make of it?
I had not heard of it before either. So apparently Turkey 5, it refers to the 5 days between Thanksgiving and Cyber Monday. So I guess a frenzy of Thanksgiving-related deals and shopping. I have seen it somewhat catch on in the analyst community, much to my chagrin. So if you could see my eyes rolling this morning when I read Turkey 5, it would be quite a sight.
Yeah, I think maybe we can safely dispense with the phrase Turkey 5. Let's agree never to utter it again on Bloomberg Technology.
It is a vow.
Okay, Bloomberg Opinions, Shira Obade, thank you for joining us. Tech is revolutionizing the Midwest. How Columbus, Ohio, America's so-called smart city, is leading the transformation next. Plus, the race for a place in China's EV market. Can a Chinese-backed Silicon Valley-designed car beat Tesla? This is Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Technology. I'm Brad Stone, filling in for Emily Chang in San Francisco. Columbus, Ohio is getting smarter. In 2016, Columbus beat 77 other cities in the U.S. Department of Transportation's first ever Smart City Challenge, winning $50 million in grant funding and the designation as America's Smart City. Since then, it's committed to redefining public transportation and what it calls the new Midwest. In the past 2 years, Columbus has eclipsed the rest of the Midwest in EV sales with a goal of introducing 300 electric cars to public fleets by 2020. The city also developed a system of self-driving shuttles, which will begin accepting passengers in December. And just last month, it was ranked the #1 rising city for unicorn startups, with Cover My Meds and Root Insurance located in the city. Here to discuss is Columbus's mayor, Andrew Ginther, and CEO of Columbus's economic development organization, Columbus 2020, Kenny McDonald. Thank you both for joining us.
Thanks for having us. Thank you.
And Mayor Ginther, I need to start by congratulating you on the Buckeyes win over the Wolverines. As a former Ohioan myself, I was very excited to see that.
It's always a good day when we're whooping Wolverines in Columbus.
Well, tell me a little bit about this designation as a smart city and about Columbus as a home to unicorn startups. I mean, Columbus is known as the home to Ohio State University, as the birthplace of, I remember my Ohio history, the fast food chain Wendy's.
Sure.
But how did you kind of foster an entrepreneurial environment in Columbus?
Well, it's all rooted in the Columbus way, and we believe we do public-private partnerships better in Columbus than anywhere in America, and we think that's true for entrepreneurs and startups. We're very proud of the success of Root Insurance and Cover My Meds, and we believe there's a bright future for entrepreneurs in our city. We're really focused on affordability, mobility, and talent, all things that are key ingredients to making sure that startups and entrepreneurs are successful in Columbus.
Kenny, I'm sure a lot of developmental organization heads are looking at the success of Columbus, trying to figure out what you guys did to stimulate an environment that was good for startups. What are the lessons here other cities can take?
Look, we've had a comprehensive strategy. We do our best to take care of the companies that already operate in our market. We are trying to attract the world's best companies to our market from around the globe. And we believe that actually those two things lead to also a great entrepreneurial environment. Our commercialization through our institutions and other platforms that we have from the private sector is increasing every day, and it's a comprehensive long-term strategy to make it the best place in the country to do business and to scale a business.
And Mayor Ginther, I mentioned that fact about Columbus exceeding other Midwestern city in EV sales. So talk a little bit about the vision for the public transportation network in Columbus. How do you incorporate EVs, and what would the impact be on congestion and transportation in the city?
Well, Smart Columbus, has been absolutely critical to our success and the progress we're making. Before the grant award, we lagged behind Midwestern cities, and since the award and Smart Columbus being implemented, which is really a community-wide, it's not just a city project, but with the award from DOT and Paul Allen's philanthropies, we've been able to build a movement in Central Ohio that has now put us ahead of other Midwestern cities and ahead of the nation with respect to electric vehicle adoption. But it really does take all of us raising awareness, working with dealers to make it easier to purchase and access, and also building infrastructure with charging stations and other amenities. And our corporate leadership has stepped up in big ways, both electrifying their fleets as well as investing in a smart grid of the future.
Mayor Ginther, Columbus was one of the finalists for Amazon's HQ2 process. Were you happy with how, not only how that search was resolved, how it ended, but how Amazon conducted it?
Absolutely. Amazon already knows the great place Central Ohio is to do business, with thousands of employees already working in the region, and they know that Columbus has a bright future. We really believe through this process we have a great roadmap for economic development for our region over the next 20 years, and it really focuses on making sure we continue to leverage and use our affordability, enhance our mobility options, but also really be aggressive about recruiting and retaining talent in Central Ohio. We believe that those three things are going to drive economic development in the future, and we have to be aggressive and thoughtful and strategic about putting those things in place.
Kenny McDonald, well, let me ask you. Mayor Ginther is obviously being very politically astute with that answer vis-a-vis Amazon. I'm sure you invested a lot of time and resources in the HQ2 process. Didn't work out that well. I remember the Alphabet division Sidewalk Labs also announced with some fanfare, a process to, I think, help facilitate non-emergency transportation in the city of Columbus. How do you feel after these two relationships about working with big tech companies when they do show interest in Columbus, Ohio?
We consider Amazon an existing industry, a company that we work with on a regular basis, even a weekly basis, and we thought the process did nothing but helped us immediately actually refine our value proposition to all kinds of companies, forced us to actually think about scale in ways that we hadn't because of the size of the project. And we are in touch every week with the world's best technology companies, including some that are already operating within our region, including AWS, Facebook. Chase has their largest technology operation in our city. Nationwide Insurance is doing much of their technology out of the Columbus market. And how do we become a great employer in a great city for those companies and continue to scale? Tech is clearly our future and impacting every business model.
Mayor Ginther, quick last question. Are you happy with the time and effort that Alphabet Labs has devoted to Ohio, to Columbus after last year's announcement?
Absolutely. We are very excited about the future, both for startups, entrepreneurships, technology of existing companies, emerging companies, and ones that we're going to welcome into the region over the next decade or two. They've been great partners to us. And as we look out here on the future, we think Columbus and Central Ohio's future is very bright.
Okay, Mayor of Columbus, Ohio, Andrew Ginther, and Columbus 2020 CEO Kenny McDonald, thanks for joining. Coming up, Byton is a Chinese-backed startup using the know-how of Silicon Valley to make the next generation of EV vehicles. We'll discuss the potential of the Chinese market with its CEO next. Plus, Google workers have another problem with management strategy. The latest revolt from employees is coming up. This is Bloomberg. Byton is a Chinese-backed and based electric car maker anchored in Silicon Valley and hot on the wheels of Tesla in China. The company is looking to target the growing market for EVs in China. It raised $500 million in June, and it's considering future funding as well as the option of going public. Joining us now from the floor of the LA Auto Show is CEO and co-founder Karsten Breitfeld. Karsten, thank you for joining us. I'm imagining that a lot of our viewers have not heard of Byton. They've heard of Tesla, obviously, and perhaps a few other electric cars. So tell me what you guys are introducing this week and when we can expect to see it on the market.
Yeah, so hi everyone. Brad, thanks to talking to me and being interested in Byton. Yeah, it's very exciting to be here at the LA Auto Show, because normally we don't do auto shows because our products are not cars in the traditional sense. We are aiming to do smart devices on wheels. So this means the product will be very different and the business model will be different. Because, you know, selling cars, even selling electric cars, is not a very sexy business model. If you look to the greatest companies right now, you might find an EBIT of 10% or less. So this is not a sustainable business model for the future. We see the car as a smart device on wheels, as a platform in the future. And this means our business will be selling cars at the beginning, yes, but then it will be based on what the smartphone and consumer electronics industry is doing today. So we are going to use the car as a platform, selling digital content to our customers, and eventually become a provider of mobility and of shared mobility. And this is what Byton is built around.
Karsten, you know, we can't go out and buy one of your cars today, and most of our viewers are not at the LA Auto Show. You're showing off a vehicle called the K-Byte concept sedan. Just tell us what the car is, how much you'll sell it for, and how it differs from other EVs that are on the market.
So first of all, the first product we introduced at the beginning of this year at CES is called M-Byte. It's an SUV, a very spacey SUV. On an affordable price position, so it will start, the entry price will be around $45,000 US. It will go to the market in China end of next year and will come to the United States mid of 2020 and to Europe at the second half of 2020. So our basic approach is it's premium, it's affordable, and it's a smart device on wheels, so we are focusing on the user experience. Now, what we are going to unveil here in LA is our second product. It's the second product built on the same technical platform, and this one is called K-Byte. And a K-Byte is a very exciting new interpretation of a sedan. So sedan in principle is a boring concept, but at least China is still a very big sedan market. So a new interpretation, very exciting design, and prepared for autonomous driving level 4. These are the features of this K-Byte car we are going to unveil today here and show in our press conference at 2:20 p.m.
And Karsten, you mentioned that you're going to start selling these vehicles in the Chinese market. You have obviously a lot of your engineering and manufacturing in China. You know, why the bet on China as opposed to other countries in the West?
So Byton was built as a global company right from the beginning. It's a premium brand, it's a global brand, it's a global product, and if you want to be global, you have to be present globally. Now, if you look to the product we want to do, it's a premium product. The base is a premium car. This means you have to do design and concept in Germany, around Munich, where all the German premium OEMs are. Then, when it comes to the smart part, you need connectivity, you need autonomous driving, artificial intelligence, very fancy style of user interfaces, and this you can do only in Silicon Valley today. The state-of-the-art technology you find in Silicon Valley is the reason why our R&D center is in Silicon Valley. And if you want to be successful in the Chinese market, affordable, sell on $45,000 price position, and being recognized as a producer out of China, then you have to be in China, you have to produce in China, and you have to do your supply chain. So this is the basic setup of the company right from the beginning. We go where the resources and the talents are and combine them to one global product, global brand, and global business model.
It sounds like you probably spent a lot of time on airplanes. So we mentioned you raised $500 million in June, but one thing we have learned from watching Tesla is that the capital requirements, not only to bring a car to market, but to scale manufacturing and get to profitability are high. So what do you plan to do to keep Byton fully funded as you move towards manufacturing and releasing your first vehicle?
Yeah, so as I said, we are going to production end of next year, end of 2019. Our plant is under construction, so the construction work is basically nearly done now. We are installing machineries. We built prototypes already in this plant, and we will start products out of the production process end of Q1 of next year and bringing it to the production quality until end of the year. As you mentioned, we went through 2 different funding rounds already, A round and B round, raised a total of around $800 million up to now, and we are just now preparing our C round funding, which will be finished in the first months of the next year, and this will bring us to production.
Okay, Byton CEO and co-founder Carsten Breitfeld, thank you for joining us. Coming up, Google workers sign a public letter against the company's plan to return to China. We'll discuss that next. This is Bloomberg. Alibaba chairman Jack Ma has been officially confirmed as a member of the Chinese Communist Party. The co-founder of China's most valuable company was among business leaders recognized in a state-backed newspaper for their contributions to the nation's development. He's one of 100 people the Communist Party's Central Committee will honor as a part of the celebration, marking 40 years since the country's economic reform and opening up. Sticking with China, Google's plan to bend to the Chinese government's desire to censor search results has struck the ire of some employees. A group assigned a public letter calling on the company to abandon the initiative known as Project Dragonfly. They write, quote, "We refuse to build technologies that aid the powerful in oppressing the vulnerable, wherever they may be. Dragonfly in China would establish a dangerous precedent, one that would make it harder for Google to deny other countries similar concessions." To discuss the issues around this, we're joined in New York by Isaac Stone-Fish, Senior Fellow at the Asia Society, and Bloomberg Technology's Mark Bergen, who just returned from a reporting trip in China. Mark, let's start with you. Talk to us about this letter. How many employees signed it, and how closely will Google management be reading this?
So as I just checked a few minutes ago, I think it's closer to over 140. What's rare in this, there have been public letters before. There was a letter earlier this year around Project Maven, Google's contract with the Pentagon. And there was a letter about Dragonfly, but this is the first time that employees have actually put their names out publicly. So I think that's going to draw a lot more attention. And I do think that Google management will pay closer attention to that because these employees are willing to go out on a limb.
Isaac, what do you make of the argument here from Google employees that they refuse to help the powerful censor the vulnerable? Is that a powerful argument?
I don't really know if that's exactly what's happening here. I wouldn't call the Chinese people who get to use Google, in this case, the vulnerable. I mean, I do certainly think they are helping the powerful. They're helping Beijing. They're helping the party here. That to me, I think, is striking. It was also strange to read the letter and see the employees try to say that this is not targeted against China, but any country that would do that, whereas China is the particular case they're dealing with right now and is by far and away the most important market where any issue like this could come up.
And Isaac, what do you make of the argument here that Google would be setting a bad precedent in China and then would have to bend to the will of other foreign governments?
So I think it's more that Google is setting a bad precedent in China for Alphabet, for other businesses, and for other American tech companies. I mean, no other market that has comparable levels of repression is anywhere near the size of China. And Russia is such a smaller market for Google and basically every other American tech company. And I think the real problem for Google to enter in this way would be the message that it sends to Facebook and to Microsoft and the way that it emboldens Beijing about, okay, look, US tech companies are going to yield.
Mark, I had the opportunity to interview Google chairman, Alphabet chairman John Hennessy recently on Bloomberg Studio 1.0, and I asked him about Project Dragonfly and the Chinese efforts, and he sounded a little ambivalent himself, Google's chairman, about this effort. Let's give a listen to what he said.
Anybody who does business in China compromises some of their core values, every single company, because the laws in China are quite a bit different than they are in our own country. The question that I think comes to my mind and that I struggle with is, are we better off giving Chinese citizens a decent search engine, a capable search engine, even if it is restricted and censored in some cases, than a search engine that's not very good? And does that improve the quality of their lives? And that's the struggle we have to work our way through.
Mark, what do you make of that argument that Google can do good even if it's there with a censored product?
Yeah, that's precisely the debate that's happening inside the company, and I think across the levels. You know, one of the employees that actually resigned over this project told me that he was talking to a colleague who said this metaphor: "Listen, a dirty window is better than no window," and so there's a strong belief, and I think the management, Sundar Pichai, the CEO, has certainly expressed this internally, that Google actually could do more good being there, and that, you know, like what Isaac was saying earlier, we have this sort of balkanization of the internet, right? Maybe 10 years ago when Google was in China, it looked very different than what it looked like now. And you have places like Indonesia where the country is asking Google to ban certain apps, and in Europe where they have the right to be forgotten. So Google sees that the world has changed. There is no sort of uniform, consistent Google and internet. And so they're like, you know, they look at other companies that are operating in China and they say, why can't we do the same?
Isaac, where does Google go from here? I mean, clearly they're waiting for some kind of license from the Chinese government to introduce Project Dragonfly, if they even still want to, you know, proceed from it being an experiment. You know, let's say they were going to grant, they were granted permission to operate in China. You know, considering the blowback and the PR punishment, do you think they even want to do that anymore?
I would guess that somewhere in Google headquarters there is a spreadsheet about projected revenues from entering China, not only for the search project, but for the host of other projects that Alphabet has, versus the PR damage, the employee morale, the people who publicly quit to protest this, and the costs of that. And I would guess almost certainly that the potential gains financially are much higher than the potential losses. So I think Google is probably going to say, unfortunately, that, well, we'll take a hit of our reputation, we'll deal with the Trump administration criticizing us for this, and if we can go in, we'll do it.
Mark, how are you reading these tea leaves? Do you think they're still going forward with it?
You know, one thing they've talked about a lot is, and Sundar sent a letter to senators saying, we feel like we're going to be behind. Like, China is marching ahead in technology, and part of this whole project is, even if we never launched it, is just a way to keep up with the direction that search and the like Chinese language internet is moving. I buy that a little bit. I do think Google looks at Tencent, they look at Alibaba, they look at the march of these companies in China and innovation there, and particularly like how they're using AI, and I think they want to be a part of that. And I think even if they don't launch a search engine, I do think they're looking at a cloud business, which may be less controversial in Congress and with their employees, and certainly other parts of Alphabet. I do think that right now we're less likely to see a search engine than we were certainly 6 months ago.
Okay, Isaac Stone-Fish from Asia Society and Bloomberg Technology's Mark Bergen, thanks so much. And that does it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology. Bloomberg Technology is live streaming on Twitter. Check us out at Technology and be sure to follow our global breaking news network, TikTok, on Twitter. This is Bloomberg.